Welcome to Business 140, Personal Financial Planning, online with Professor Joe Lane. We're getting ready to do our finals review. You are getting close to the end of this semester if you're watching this particular video. Now remember, in our finals review, we have done chapters 13, 14, and 15. Just finished those. I've done the no's and to be familiar with in those three chapters. So as you've looked at those three chapters, that's prepared you for the final for those three chapters. What I haven't done are the chapters 1 through 12, and that's what I'm getting ready to take the book and do with you right now. However, I want to make sure I mention your final finance project that you have to do. It's on Canvas. It tells you how to do it and that sort of thing, but let me explain it here again if it might be helpful to you. Where this document is located is at the end of the Chapter 15 handout. You know, my study notes that you have on Canvas, if you scroll down past the last of the Chapter 15 about trust and everything, you will find this document. Final Finance Project, Statement 1, Statement 2, Statement 3, 4, 5. What you are doing is, and this is kind of fun, I love doing this in class. I wish that we were going to be together to do this. But here's what you're going to do. You're not going to do a research paper for me, but, and you don't need to make, it says make 2 copies. You don't need to make 2 copies, obviously, since we're doing it on Canvas. A Martian has landed and has chosen you to give him some personal financial planning advice. His question to you is this: we on Mars are going to begin personal financial planning. Good for them. They should. Please give me 5 specific statements or pieces of advice that I can share when I return to Mars. Also provide me with a brief discussion explaining each statement. So I want you to give me 5 statements that you've learned as we've gone through personal financial planning. I erased it. I want you to give me 5 statements that you would give the Martian. Here's 5 things about personal financial planning you need to know. Then I want you in about this much space. Now I realize you're going to be doing it on Canvas, but I want you to give me an explanation of why you gave them that piece of advice. Now if you give the Martian 5 pieces of advice and you don't give any explanation for those pieces of advice, it's going to count about half off on this final finance project, and it's worth 50, 60 points. So you want to do well on this. 5 good pieces of personal financial planning advice, and then 3 or 4 sentences from each one explaining why you give them that advice. That make sense? Okay. That's your finance project. It's always fun to do that in class because I get a chance to find out all those things, all those different things that you would suggest that the Martian do. There's a lot of things. All right. Ooh, that thing squeaks. Let's get in here and let's review for the final. Of course, I'm reviewing just out of our text as I always do. Chapter 1, page 8. Chapter 1, page 8. I would know the definition of personal financial planning. Probably didn't surprise you, did it? On page 9, I would know the 6-step financial planning process. Define financial goals, that sort of thing. Both of these were no items on test number 1. So I would know personal financial planning on page 9. I would know the 6-step financial planning process. All right. Chapter 2. Chapter 2 is the chapter having to do with financial statements. There's a few things in Chapter 2 I either want you to know or be familiar with. At the very first of Chapter 2, on page 43, there's a few things that I want you to be familiar with. On page 43, I want you to be familiar with what a balance sheet is. A person's financial position at a given point in time. I want you to be familiar with what an income or an expense statement is. It shows or measures financial performance over time. over time. That's two things I want you to be familiar with. I want you to be familiar with what a budget is. These are be familiar with. A detailed financial report that looks forward based on expected income and expenses. It's a projection forward. It's an estimate, your best estimate of income and expenses in the future. On page 46, I want you to be familiar with what assets are. Assets are things that you own. On page 47, I want you to be familiar with what liabilities are. These are both on the balance sheet. Liabilities are things that you owe. And on page 48, I want you to be familiar with what equity is. Equity is your worth. Remember, in a balance sheet tells you your financial position at a given point in time. Balance sheets have assets, what you own, liabilities, what you owe. The difference is your net worth or your equity. Okay, that was on page 48. On page 51, I want you to be familiar with what income is. Now, these are the things that are in an income and expense statement. Incomes are earnings received from wages, salaries, bonuses, that sort of thing. So wages you receive from salaries, bonuses, that sort of thing. That's what income is. On page 52, I want you to be familiar with what expenses are. This is just the cost of living, so to speak. Taxes, that sort of thing. If your expenses are less than your income, you have a cash surplus. Be familiar with that. If your expenses are greater than your income, you have a cash deficit. Be familiar with that. Now, in the latter part of chapter 2, we talked about something else. We talked about the time value of money. That's on page 69. Still in chapter 1, page 69. Excuse me. I would know the time value of money. I would know what the time value of money is. Remember in test 1, you had to know the time value of money, and you had to do a future value and a present value calculation. Well, the same thing is true here. I would know what the time value of money is, and I would know how to do the future value of a single amount. And I've got a good example for you there in the handout. If you don't have the book, page 69. Okay, future value of a single amount. The value to which an amount today will grow if it earns a specific rate of interest over a given period of time. So if you have $50,000 today, and you're going to be able to invest that for 10 years, and you're going to be able to, I got too quiet, got too still. Some of my lighting went off. Okay. And you're going to invest that $10,000, I think is what I said, whatever amount I said, over 10 years, and you think that you're going to be able to get, say, 4% interest on it, then what you need to make that calculation. Okay. Then on page 71, you need to do present value. I want you to do a present value calculation of a single amount, just like you did. I need $400,000 15 years from now, and I can earn 5% interest. How much do I have to deposit today to have $450,000 out there? So a future value is I have this much now. What will it grow to? I want you to be able to do that calculation. And then you have present value. This is the amount I need out here. How much at present do I have to deposit to be able to have that amount at that particular period of time? If you have your book on page 69 and 71, there are good examples of how to calculate that. If you don't, I have in the chapter 1 handout, I have good illustrations of that. And you know that Appendix A, Appendix B, Appendix C, Appendix D that are in the back of your text. I will make copies of the appendixes that you need to be able to make those calculations. Appendix A and Appendix C. Appendix A is what you need if you're when you do the future value. Appendix C is the one you're going to need when you do the present value, and I'll have both of those in there for you. Okay, review that. So know what the time value of money is, be able to do the present value and the future value calculation for a single amount. Chapter 4. A few things in chapter 4. This was the chapter on managing basic assets. A few things in this chapter I'd like for you to be familiar with. On page 133, I want you to be familiar with what a demand deposit is, checking account. And also on page 133, I want you to be familiar with what a time deposit is, a savings account. I know that's probably easy, but just some little bit of terminology I want us to be familiar with. Chapter 5 is the chapter on home ownership. I think it's homes and automobiles. Chapter 5, page 185. I want you to be familiar with the different costs of home ownership. What I'm trying to do, I'm trying to go through the text and pick out those things that are I think really important or pretty doggone important. Knowing the definition of personal financial planning, knowing the steps in the personal financial planning process, that's really important. That's good know stuff. And then there's, like I say, some things that, like financial statements. I want you to be familiar with balance sheet, income statement, you know, what makes up the balance sheet, the income statement, assets, liabilities, that sort of thing. I want you to be familiar with what demand deposits are, what time deposits are. So I'm going through here and trying to come up with those things that are the most important. Most of us are going to buy a home at some point in time. So on page 185, 186, 187, probably 188, 189, but I remember I laid this out very, very nicely for you in your handout. I want you to be familiar with the cost of home ownership. This is to be familiar with. The costs such as, you know, the down payment, the closing cost, the mortgage payments, that sort of thing. So be familiar with the cost of home ownership. Sorry, just making sure I don't miss anything on this. In chapter 6, we got to talking about using credit. I'd like for you to be familiar with a couple of things as it relates to using credit. Page 218. There's one little sentence here. I know it's just one little sentence, but I'd like you to be familiar with this sentence when it relates to use the improper use of credit. Page 218, right about in the middle of the page, it says this: many people use consumer credit to live beyond their means. Just be familiar with, there are things you can use credit for, to buy a car, to buy a house, do things like that. One thing you don't want to do is to use consumer credit to live beyond your means. Sometimes that's what people do with their credit cards. They live beyond what they're capable of living by charging a lot of stuff on their credit cards and really building up a lot of very expensive debt. So all I want you to be familiar with is that an improper use of credit is using it to live beyond your means. That's all I want you to be familiar with. Okay, page 261, this is chapter 7. Now this is, we were talking about credit cards and that sort of thing. Now on page 261, we're talking about consumer loans. This is where you make loans like for automobiles and things like that. On page 261, I would be familiar with what consumer loans are. Be familiar with what consumer loans are. Now let's go over to chapter 8. Chapter 8, page 301, 302. This is where we get into insurance. And he started off our insurance talking about risk. He said, before we talk about insurance, we need to talk a little bit about risk. So on page 301 and 302, he talked about the concept of risk. I'd be familiar with the fact that he says that risk is uncertainty concerning a potential economic loss. Got to get more active here, don't I? All right, we'll try that again. Risk, I'd be familiar with what risk is. Let me climb aboard again. I think this thing sooner or later is going to break or throw me off. Uncertainty concerning a potential economic loss. Now, there's a couple of things as it relates to risk that I want you to be familiar with. I want you to be familiar with what loss prevention is. As it relates to risk, I want you to be familiar with what loss prevention is. Any activity that reduces the probability that a loss will occur. If you don't pile up junk in your garage, you don't put gasoline cans close to flammable stuff, that would be practicing loss prevention. Loss prevention, any activity that reduces the probability that a loss will occur. I want you to be familiar with what loss control is. Any activity that lessens the severity of a loss once it occurs. A seatbelt would be loss control. Sprinkler system, fire extinguisher would be loss control. Any activity that lessens the severity of a loss once it occurs. And then I'd be familiar also on page 302 with what an insurance policy is. Basically, an insurance policy is transferring the loss from a risk to an insurance company. A contract between the insured and the insurer under which the insurer agrees to reimburse the insured for any losses suffered according to specific terms. You are transferring your risk of loss to the insurance company. That's what I want you to be familiar with. You're transferring your risk of loss to the insurance company. Okay. Then we get into chapter 8. We're talking about, we're still in chapter 8. We're talking about different types of life insurance. One type of life insurance that I want you to be familiar with is term insurance. Term insurance provides only cash benefits for a period of time. Life insurance, scratch that from the record. Life insurance provides only death benefits for a period of time, and you get no cash value. The only way you get anything out of a term insurance policy is if you die during the term, your beneficiary gets something. Simplest and easiest type of insurance. A life insurance, I'd be familiar with that. And that was on page 311. On page 314 is the second type of life insurance, whole life insurance. It gives you ongoing life insurance coverage. As long as you pay the premium, you have that coverage up until the time you die, and it accumulates cash value. Okay. And somebody's going to get the proceeds as long as you pay the premium. That's whole life. The third type of life insurance, the three most common types, the third type of life insurance is universal life. Universal life is a life insurance that combines term insurance with a tax-sheltered savings investment account. Universal life is a combination of term life and a tax-saving investment account. That's all you need to be familiar with. Now, talking a little bit about, we're in chapter 9, talking about health insurance. One good thing about this video, if you didn't quite get what I said, you can go back and listen to it again. So that's good. That's good. On page 343, and it relates to health insurance, I'd like for you to be familiar with what group health insurance is. That's something that's really good. Anytime that you take a job, you're getting ready to take a position with a company, you might check on their health insurance. I mean, if they have health insurance and they pay a portion of it, that's really, really helpful. Group health insurance. Health insurance consisting of contracts written between a group employee and a healthcare provider. So I'd be familiar with what group health is. I'd be familiar with what an indemnity health insurance is. That's where you buy insurance from an insurance company, and then when you go to the hospital or the doctor, that insurance company pays that hospital or doctor up to whatever the policy whatever the policy calls for. And then the third type, I wanted to kind of mention like the three different types of life insurance: term life, whole life, universal life. Kind of the three biggies when it comes to medical insurance is group medical insurance, indemnity insurance, and then managed care, which is on page 345. That's where you contract directly with a health insurance provider. I'd just be familiar with those. We're into chapter 10 now. Chapter 10. Let me make sure I didn't miss anything. Chapter 10, page 383. 383. I would be familiar with what actual cash value is. On 383, I'd be familiar with what actual cash value is. And on page 390, I'd be familiar with what replacement cost is. When it comes to property insurance, remember what we want is replacement cost. I'd be familiar with replacement cost is. And I'd be familiar with what actual cash value is. Okay. I would know what coinsurance is. I would know what coinsurance is. And I would know how to work one of those problems as it relates to coinsurance. That's on page 384. Coinsurance says, in property insurance, provision requiring a policyholder to buy insurance of an amount equal to a specified percentage of the replacement value of their property. Okay, so if you have insurance, if replacement cost insurance of your home is $300,000, your insurance company says you have to buy 80% of the value of that to get full coverage. So the insurance company says you have to buy 80%. So if you want full coverage on that house, you have to buy $240,000 worth of insurance, property insurance. And I'd certainly buy replacement cost, not actual cash value. Okay, let's say you buy $240,000 worth of replacement cost. $240,000, of insurance, just like you're supposed to. What if you have a $50,000 loss? How much is the insurance company going to pay? $50,000. What if you have a total loss? What's the insurance going to pay? Everything to replace your home, if you have replacement cost insurance, everything to replace your home like it was. Because if you buy the amount of insurance that you're required to by the insurance company, any loss is going to be paid for total. Okay. If, let's say, you didn't have enough money to do that, and you bought $160,000 worth of insurance instead of $240,000, I think that's 3/4, better be, or 75% of what you should have bought. So what is any loss going to be paid at? If you had a $40,000 loss, what's the insurance company going to pay? $30,000. They're going to pay 3/4 of it because you only bought 3/4 of the required coverage. So I would know what coinsurance is, and I'd be able to work one of the coinsurance problems. Obviously, I'll have to give you information. I'll have to give you how much the insurance, I'll have to give you the replacement cost of your home. I'll have to give you what the insurance company required. I'll have to give you that you pay. I'll have to give you how much you actually paid, and I'll have to give you how much the loss was. But you'll have to do the calculation. Okay. I just want you to be familiar with, when it comes to automobile insurance, we're still in Chapter 10. When it comes to automobile insurance, I want you to be familiar with the 4 parts of almost all automobile insurance policies. Part A, Part B, Part C, Part D, and I think I put that in your handout for you. Part A is the liability coverage. Part B is the medical payments coverage. Part C is uninsured motorist. Part D is the coverage for damage to your vehicles. So those, just be familiar that it's called the PAP, P-A-P, the Personal Automobile Policy. Personal Automobile Policy, PAP. There's 4 parts to it, A, B, C, and D. Just be familiar with those. I put paper clips where I have things. Oh, I found it. I couldn't figure out what it was. Chapter 11. I want you to be familiar on page 422 with what the securities market is. Remember, that's where stocks and bonds and other securities are bought and sold. Okay, so let me let you get caught up with me. Chapter 11. Actually, if you have your book, page 422, I just want you to be familiar with what securities markets are. On page 427, there's a couple of terms in investments, especially in investments of stock, that I want you to be familiar with. I want you to be familiar with what a bull market, B-U-L-L market is, and a bear market is. A bull market, a stock market that you call a bull market, you have optimism, you have growth associated with investor optimism, economic recovery, expansion. It's good. You want the stock market to be a bull market. That means it's growing. A bear market is just the opposite, associated with investor pessimism and economic slowdown. We have been in a huge bull market in the last several years. We're moving very much now because of this coronavirus into a bear market. People are uncertainty really creates problems in the stock market. And we have a lot of uncertainty right now. Although I do think we'll bounce back. This may take some time. Chapter 12. Chapter 12 is the chapter where we're talking about investing in stocks and bonds. So let me let you get to your chapter 12 notes. The only thing I want you to be familiar with is we talked about and just what I mentioned a minute ago. Risk is always, when you invest in stocks and bonds, there's risk involved, more risk in stocks than there is in bonds. And there's different types of risks that can happen. I just want you to be familiar with one of them on page 463. I want you to be familiar with what an event risk is, event risk. The risk that some major unexpected event that will occur that will lead to a sudden and substantial change in the value of an investment. The reason I want you to be familiar with an event risk is because where we are right now with the coronavirus, who would have ever thought? That's an event that has turned the United States upside down and turned our economy upside down. And of course, I continue to pray for each one of you that are, are watching the video, that you're doing well, your family's doing well, from the virus and from our downturn in the economy. We're going to come back. We're going to come back. Prayer's not a bad idea. Okay, I'd be familiar with what an event risk is on page 463. In page 495, chapter 12. 495, chapter 12. Kind of like I wanted you to be familiar with a bear market and a bull market, and kind of like I wanted you to be familiar with demand deposit and time deposit. There's a couple of things as it relates to bonds that I want you to be familiar with. And that's on page 495, and that's a premium bond and a discount bond. I want you to be familiar with those, and in case you can't find it in your notes or whatever, I'll give it to you. A premium bond, a bond whose market value is higher than par. A discount bond, a bond where market value is lower than par. A premium bond is one that sells for more than its par value. I'm trying to think. I think I'll just leave it with that. If you can be familiar with this, I don't think I'll go through the examples. A premium bond is a bond where the market value is higher than par. A discount bond is a bond where the market value is lower than par. Okay. All right, let me see. Got notes. I'm just trying to check them. Got to make sure we do well here. So hang on. There's one other thing that I wanted you to be familiar with. And I don't think I talked with you. I mentioned it. Let me just see if I can find that for us. I know this is great, sitting here watching me turn the pages on a text. I may be. Yeah. Chapter 12. Back to chapter 12. Page 464. Sorry. But if I'd had this on the final and you said, wait a minute, he mentioned that. You remember in chapter 12 on page 463, I wanted you to be familiar with what an event risk was. An event risk. Okay. Well, I overlooked on page 464, I want you to know the returns from investing. What are the returns that you get from investing? The three are current income, you would get perhaps dividends, interest paid, capital gains, that's where you sell for more than you bought it, and earning interest on interest. Uh-oh, let's see if I can make that happen without getting up. No, gotta get up. Okay, that's interest from earning interest on interest. That's where you take the interest that you've earned and you apply it back into your investments. So what I want you to know, I want you to know the three returns from investing. Current income, capital gains, and earning interest on interest. And now, that's chapters 1 through 12. Now remember, we've already done chapters 13, 14, and 15. And there's knows and be familiar with in those 3 chapters that are on the final as well. I think we've talked about the finance project. It's scroll down after your chapter 15 notes and you'll find it there. And with instructions on what you need. And we've talked about what you needed to do with that. I've enjoyed being, again, I said this to you, I think, in the chapter 15 video. I enjoy being with you in this. I halfway through it face to face, and then the last half on by way of video. I do hope you will be a personal financial planner. I turned around here to look at my guide. I've already erased the person. But I hope you will do that. I hope you've learned some things from that. Now, let's talk about this for a minute. The finance project, I'm going to say it's 50 points. It may be 60, but I'm going to say it's 50. The final is 100. That's 150 points that it's going to hit you right at the end of this semester. That's 25% of your total grade in here. Finish strong. Finish strong with what you've done. Okay. You know, right now times are kind of uncertain. You may be having situations, hopefully none of your families having any health situations, but there's always health situations that can come up. Your work situation may be sketchy. You may not even be working right now. You may be worried. I'm sure that you've got more stress than usual. I think we all do during this coronavirus thing. But whether it's the coronavirus or whatever it is, I want to give you this advice. If you're listening to this video whenever, finish strong. Finish strong. Especially right now, you may have some other things going on that are kind of downers. There's some negative things that you're having to deal with. I want you to deal with something positive. You've got 150 points here. Study the knows, study the be familiar with. Take the time to really focus and get ready for this final. Because what's going to happen, maybe this isn't working well or this isn't working well right now. You need a positive right now. How about that positive being you finish strong in personal financial planning, you make a passing C, B, or A in personal financial planning, you've passed the course and you're one class closer to finishing your higher education degree, your Associate of Applied Science in Business and Technology. That's something positive. Hey, a lot of stuff going on, but I hung in there with this class and hopefully any of the other classes you have. I hung in there with personal finance. I passed the course. I did well, and I'm one class closer to getting my Associate of Applied Science degree. That's a positive thing for you. Okay, well that takes care of the review. You'll be taking that test towards I guess the first part of May when that test comes up. Good luck to you as you study for it again. One more time. Stay focused, study hard, get your notes if you have your book, get your book, work real hard to get all that done. Do a really, really good job with it. I have enjoyed you in personal finance. I hope I get to see you in another class in the fall. Thank you for making it a great semester for me. I always learn stuff when I go through this too, and I hope you have as well. Now you know the drill here. I have to make a loud clapping noise. So I was hoping my executive producer might drop by today. He said he might, but he hasn't. I was kind of killing a moment or two in case he came in. I was going to put him in front of the screen, but I guess he's not going to do that. Okay, a loud clap of noise. And we will sign off on our review for the final for Business 140. Good luck to you. Thank you.